Krishna, everyone. Welcome to this very special podcast, the one that I have been eagerly looking forward to. So, today we are going to explore a very special topic, the art of working Krishna. So, naturally, this topic is something that is relevant for every single one of us. Work is something that we all do, whether we are students, professionals, parents, or even as spiritual practitioners. So, how can we work in such a way that our actions are not just duties but acts of devotion? So Krishna himself talks about this in Srimad Bhagavad Gita. In fact, in chapter 2, sloka number 50, he calls this Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam, the art of work. And throughout Bhagavad Gita, he goes on instructing us on this art of work. So today we have this immense privilege to dive deep into this wisdom with our esteemed guest, none other than Her Grace Urmila Devi Dasi. So for those of you who are already familiar with her work, you know that she is such an incredible teacher, scholar, and a lovely devotee. And for those of you who are listening to her for the first time, trust me, you are in for something truly special. So let me give a brief introduction of Her Grace Urmila Mataji before we actually start discussing the topic. So Her Grace Urmila Mataji is an initiated disciple of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Ever since her initiation in 1973, she has been tirelessly rendering service to the worldwide ISKCON community in various capacities. She is in the Vanaprastha Ashrama since 1996. She is blessed with 3 children, 13 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandsons. She has a PhD in education. She was a primary and secondary teacher for 27 years. She has 19 years of experience of school management. She is serving as the chair of the Shastric Advisory Council to the GBC, and she was an associate editor of Back to Godhead magazine for 30 years. She was formerly a professor of sociology and religion at the Bhaktivedanta College. She travels prolifically worldwide teaching Krishna consciousness. She also is an author of several books. So, to list a few of them, Krishna Meditations, Essence Seekers, Dr. Best Learn to Read, an 83-book literary program for students, the Great Mantra for Mystic Meditation, and to add to the long list, the recent one, Career Dharma, the Natural Art of Work. So, as is evident, Mataji has created and is continuing to create an astounding body of work in the service of Krishna and Prabhupada. So, Mataji, what you have done and are continuing to do is truly inspiring, not just for me, but to many. And I have been a secret admirer of yours. Since the moment I started listening to your classes, I've been consuming your content that's available online. The clarity, the depth, the well structured classes that you give, and especially my most favorite, how you take the deep philosophy of Krishna consciousness and turn it into these practical steps that we can start applying in our day to day life has had a tremendous impact on my life. And also, a quick trivia, actually, I was living in North Carolina. I was working in High Point for 7 years between 2008 and 2015 before I moved back to India for good. But my bad, I discovered you much later, and I truly missed out on the opportunity to get your personal association while I was there. But however, I'm happy and grateful that by Krishna and Prabhupada's mercy, I am getting your virtual association through this podcast. So you are one of my spiritual heroes. It's literally a dream come true for me. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for agreeing to do this. You were so quick in saying yes, so gracious. So welcome to the podcast, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
So Mataji, let's start off with a very fundamental question. So the
Well,
moment
first of all, you said I have tirelessly served the movement. I sometimes do get tired.
Okay.
You could say constantly, but I don't know if you could say tirelessly. I do sometimes. So yes, what is your first question?
So glad that you are also just human and you also get tired.
I'm definitely also a human. Yes.
So Mataji, let's start with a very fundamental question. So when we say work, so the general understanding is we think work means something we do for earning a livelihood. So what is the definition of work from the Vedic and spiritual perspective?
Well, there are different definitions, and what I think we are going to need to do for this podcast is that you're going to need to define how you want to limit the word work, because we could define work with the word karma,
Mm-hmm.
which means any kind of activity at all.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got Srila Rupa Goswami in the definition of bhakti uses the word shilanam, which means action,
Okay.
and can mean mental action or physical action. It can mean thoughts and feelings and desires,
Mm-hmm.
as well as physically moving your body. So then, if we're going to define work that broadly, it would mean absolutely anything you do.
Mm-hmm.
In our book, Career Dharma, The Natural Art of Work, we define work as what you do to make a livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
And we distinguish that from, taking care of your family or doing things for recreation. Krishna distinguishes in Bhagavad Gita 6:17,
Mm-hmm.
working for a livelihood and recreation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really up to you. And I think it would be helpful for the audience and also for me
Mm-hmm.
to know how do you want to define work for the basis of this particular conversation?
We'll go with the Rupa Goswami's definition of Sheelanam Mataji because we'll be talking about the intention behind the action, the consciousness, thoughts, everything. So,
Okay, but that becomes all encompassing.
mm-hmm.
So if we're going to take it like that, it would become everything we do on both a mental and a physical level.
Okay. Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes, Mataji, maybe we'll just slightly touch on the mental aspects, but broadly we'll talk about the physical action. I don't want to make it too
Okay,
broad.
okay. But it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be clear for everybody that at least today we're not talking about career and livelihood, but
Yes.
we're talking about all action. And it's good to make that distinction
Mm-hmm.
because I say for career dharma, we are not talking about work in such a
Mm-hmm.
broad sense. We're talking very specifically about livelihood.
Okay. Okay. So, Mataji, there are all these different perspectives on work. Some say work is just a means to an end. That end could be just survival. That end could be achieving success in terms of achieving one's goals or just becoming happy. And others say work is an expression through art, dance, music, or whatever, painting. So, what is the spiritual take on work?
Well, again, if you're going to look at different ways of dividing work, when you're
Mm-hmm.
working for livelihood, you definitely are working for survival.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no question about it. Uh, you wouldn't do that work if it wasn't necessary for your survival
Mm-hmm.
on one level. And then the work we do for recreation is maybe just for creative expression. So there are different goals for different types of work. And if we think about the division of, say, bhakti, which is transcendent activity,
Mm-hmm.
then our varna, which is our means of livelihood, and our ashram, which is our place in our biological progression,
Mm-hmm.
there would be different goals. However, when it comes to the science of bhakti yoga, we can say, regardless of what is the immediate goal, so you might say, I'm driving to the store to buy vegetables. That's my end, that's my purpose. Or I'm taking my child to school because I want them to be educated. Yeah, that's my purpose.
Okay.
Or I'm spending time in the garden for relaxation and rejuvenation, as Prabhupada used the word recreation.
Mm-hmm.
That's my goal. But in Bhakti Yoga, we say that regardless of what the or intermediate or immediate or more obvious goal is, that really our only goal should be to please the senses of Krishna. If we think about, Prabhupada says, at least on one occasion, that we're all cells in the universal body of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada often uses the analogy that we should please the senses of the Lord, just like every part of the body is putting food into the stomach. So, when I'm putting food into the stomach, it's nourishing all my cells. So the cells of my body, in one sense, they have their own immediate personal goal.
Mm-hmm.
So cells in my spleen and the cells in my bones and in my heart and my lungs, they have an immediate goal of their own survival and their own happiness, whatever that means to a lung cell. I'm not sure how a lung cell defines happiness, but
Mm-hmm.
they have their own eating, sleeping, mating, and defending
Mm-hmm.
sense. However, their ultimate goal is to serve my whole body, is to serve me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lung cell or a heart cell or a stomach cell or a bone cell in my body, I am guessing has no awareness that I exist. In
mm,
other words, that cell probably doesn't have any awareness that it's part of a larger organ in my body, that is part of a larger body, and that it's meant to serve the body as a whole, and that I am kind of the chief soul in the body.
mm,
It's probably just focused on its own happiness. But actually, it does have the goal of keeping my whole body healthy. So,
mm,
Krishna consciousness means I become conscious, I become aware that really I don't just have the goal of my own survival or my own happiness,
mm,
but really I have the goal of the happiness of the whole, the
mm,
happiness of my source, that kshetra jam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetra chubarata kshetra gayorgyanam matajganam matamama, that there's another owner in this body besides me, and that is the Lord, and I am a part and parcel of the Lord. So everything I'm doing should be to satisfy him.
mm,
Even my own immediate happiness should be for that purpose. Just like I, as the owner of this body, want that all my bodily cells are happy and healthy. I might not think about it that much, but that's actually what I want. I want every cell in my bones and every cell in my spleen and my gallbladder and my pancreas and my liver. I want them all to be happy and healthy.
mm, mm,
So, of course, I may want that selfishly because I'm thinking they're all my little slaves, but Krishna also wants us to be happy.
mm,
Now, he wants us to be happy not because he needs us, because
mm,
he's sufficient, but because he actually loves us.
mm,
So, and our working for our happiness, therefore, should be as part of our working for his happiness.
mm, mm,
You know, I want to keep my body, my mind healthy and fit and satisfied so I can be of service to the whole.
mm,
And then my very means of living should be of service to the whole.
mm,
Just like how the cell in my lungs gets its nourishment, how the cell in my lungs gets healthy is very much, it's 100% actually connected to the functioning of my lungs, which is 100% connected to the health of my body. So if I'm in Krishna consciousness, then
mhm,
I'm thinking whether it's, recreation in the garden or whether it's taking care of my child or
mhm,
whether it's working at my job, all of those things are meant to contribute, although immediately they seem to be for my personal health and happiness, they're actually to contribute to the health of the part of the body that I'm connected with, which is meant to contribute to the whole body of God. And
mm,
when we come to that consciousness, there actually is nothing selfish anymore. Everything becomes transformed.
mm. Okay. Wonderful, Mataji. Very detailed explanation with a beautiful example. So, Mataji, in the art of working for Krishna, just now you clarified to us that the objective is clearly to please the Supreme Lord. Now, in
Correct.
choosing the work, so how do I choose the work? Like that work, is it given by my guru, higher authority? Is it directly given by the scripture? Let's say I want to work on a book project or like a podcast like this. So it should definitely should it be assigned by somebody higher above, or is it something that I myself can take the initiative? I guess my question here is who decides the work here? Should it always come from Guru Shastra Sadhu, or can it just be my own self initiated? How do I distinguish these two?
Okay, let's look at the body.
Mm-hmm.
So the work of the body is directed by the brain, but not all of it. There's a lot of parts of the body that do actually take their own initiative without being directly uh, ordered by the brain. In fact, there's a lot of immediate reflexes that just like go to the spinal cord and back and never make it up to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So both of those things are there, both direction by the brain and initiative by the parts of the body. If you think of, say, a company, so let's take another analogy. Let's take the analogy that we're employees. I use this analogy a lot, that
Mm-hmm.
we're employees in Krishna's company. He's got a love of God company, and we work for him, and our payment is love of God. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the head of a company and if you're a good leader, and there are good and bad leaders, but if you're a good leader, you want your employees to do two things. You want them to do what they're told to do, and you want them to look around and take initiative to improve the company.
Mm.
So the best companies actually seek the advice from the employees. They
Mm.
seek it out, they encourage it. I don't know if they still do it, but like Google used to have a policy that 1 day a week their employees could work on anything they wanted
Right.
as long as it was for the good of the company.
Mhm.
And a lot of the best innovations in Google came from that time
Mhm.
when they gave people freedom.
Mhm.
And in fact, any of our listeners who are parents,
Mhm.
so you want your children to do what they're told. Of course, if your children always do what they're told, you would be a little worried about it.
Mm.
Actually, I just heard Prabhupada say that naughty children become intelligent, that one of the evidences of intelligence in childhood is naughtiness.
Mm.
So if your children always did what they were told exactly like robots, you would actually be concerned.
Mm.
If they never exhibited any kind of difference. And we see in Krishna's pastimes that, like, Krishna argues with Rukmini, and then she just faints.
Mm.
And Krishna says, I didn't want you to faint. I wanted you to argue back with me.
Mhm.
Or when the cowherd boys go into Agasura's mouth, and our acharyas say that Krishna didn't want them to do that.
Mm.
Uh, so there is in the Leela that the living entity sometimes surprises Krishna with their own, they apparently disobey orders, or Krishna will say, I want to see you, Radharani. And Radharani says, I'm not seeing you.
Mm.
You were flirting with some other girl. I'm not going to see you today.
Mm.
So there's not an absolute following of orders in a loving relationship.
Mm.
A normal husband and wife don't want their spouse to absolutely do everything they say if they're a psychologically healthy person.
Mm.
But in general, one follows the orders.
Mhm.
At the same time, a parent wants the child to take some initiative.
Mm.
Prabhupada says the first class servant is someone who acts without even being given an order. They understand the mind and the heart of the master.
Mm.
So Prabhupada wants us to take initiative. And if you always have to give orders to everybody, frankly, it's exhausting.
Mm.
Like, if you constantly have to order everybody what to do,
Mm.
it's not pleasing.
Mm.
You want to be able to you want to have people follow specific orders,
Mhm.
like, okay, go to this city and start a temple. And then you also want to give a general instruction, print books, distribute prasadam, spread Krishna consciousness, create an ideal varnashram society.
Mm.
You want to give those general, like Prabhupada said near the end of his presence with us, I have given the ideas, now you give the shape.
Mm. Mm.
I was thinking about that statement a lot in regard to our book Career Dharma, where my co-author, Dr. Ruchira Datta, and I are really trying to like solidify what is the shape.
Mm.
So that's very enlivening. I mean,
Mm.
unless you're an insecure dictator.
Mm.
But
Mm.
if you're a psychologically normal person,
Mhm.
it's very enlivening if somebody in your company
Mhm.
says, hey, I have an idea how we could increase profits here, or
Mm.
I have an idea how we could cut waste, or I have an idea how we could, make life better for the employees, have
Mhm.
happier employees.
Mhm.
So Krishna's not insecure and he's not a dictator,
Mhm.
and he's very enlivened. Now, when we come up with our own things, that should still be within the realm of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. Now,
Mhm.
Shastra is extremely broad.
Mhm.
I mean, if you want to say what's allowed by Shastra, it's huge.
Mhm.
So that's narrowed somewhat by Sadhu.
Mhm.
So if we look at the examples of Sadhu, especially contemporary sadhus or near contemporary sadhus.
Mhm.
So if we look at the example of sadhus millions of years ago, that may not be so relevant.
Mhm.
You're not going to make a flying palace like Kardama Muni and take your wife on a tour all over the universe. It's just not that relevant. That doesn't give me guidance. Should I do a podcast today? It doesn't really help with that. But if I look at the examples of sadhus, like say in Mahaprabhu's time, or I look at contemporary sadhus, we have our Sangha, our ISKCON Sangha,
Mhm.
and there's the Gaudiya Sampradaya is larger than that even. We look within our Gaudiya Sampradaya and we can see what are sadhus doing. And then, of course, we have Guru, and Guru is very personal. Now, of course, like my Guru Maharaj has passed away, he's left this planet so many years ago, so I can't consult with him. Should I do this podcast today or not? And even if he was here, I don't think he'd appreciate that.
Right.
The spiritual master doesn't really want to be asked, should I buy blue shoes or black shoes, or, should I do a podcast on japa or kirtan? Should I do a podcast at all? That kind of thing is actually annoying. Now, maybe if somebody is only been in Krishna consciousness for a month or a year, that kind of guidance is okay. But at a certain point, it's funny, Prabhupada said we should always remain a fool in front of Guru, but not that we should act like a fool, we should be useful. There was a devotee who wrote, he signed his name, "Your eternally useless servant." So nobody wants an eternally useless servant. We want people who are going to take initiative. What did Prabhupada say? Individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. Prabhupada wants people to take initiative, but within the realm of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. If your initiative is not within the realm of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, then you shouldn't do it. And certainly, we can consult with Guru, we can consult with sadhus. This is one of the reasons why we have our ISKCON Sangha, is so we can consult with others. And sometimes, of course, when you consult with others, you get disparate opinions.
Right.
But still, we should do that. And of course, we also want to have a subjective guide. I was just hearing Prabhupada say this morning. It says frequently that we can judge ourselves whether or not we're making advancement. This morning, he was talking in the class I was listening to. He was talking about the 26 qualities of a devotee, and to judge, are you developing those qualities? Our basic judge is, am I becoming more attached to Krishna and less attached to Maya? So, for example, I knew one devotee that wanted to do a homeless shelter. That was what he wanted to do as his service, but he didn't have the money. And so he was looking for a grant from the government in America. Now, in America, there's a separation of church and state. And so he couldn't get a government grant and do something that was connected with a particular religion. The government grant required that he couldn't even restrict the residents to the following of the 4 regulated principles. So if he had a homeless shelter, he had to allow smoking, he had to allow meat. And, he so much wanted to do this homeless shelter that he went ahead and did it anyway. So his behavior to me is a clear example of initiative that would not be within the realm of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and would not be enlivening to us. So we look, is it approved by Shastra? Is it what's done by sadhus? Is it approved by my Guru, if it's possible to consult with Guru or senior Vaishnavas? Does it bring me closer to Krishna? Otherwise, does it put me in total anxiety? Am I snapping at everybody? Am I always tired? What is the effect on me as a person? Or is it something that enlivens me? Is it something that I feel myself advancing? So all of those things together.
Okay. So, Mataji, why should we work for Krishna?
Actually, one other thing I should mention in this regard, if we're looking at work assigned by Krishna and thought of by ourselves, if we look at the Varnas, the Varnas is work that is, Prabhupada would say, prescribed duties. But that work is according to our nature.
Right.
So it's what I am most suited to do, what I am most comfortable doing, what suits me best, what fits me, what's the best expression of myself as prescribed by the Lord. It's the joining of those. The Lord is saying, for someone of your temperament, for someone of your mentality, for someone of your nature, this is the kind of work that you should do that would be perfect for you. And to some extent, we could also say that's true for ashram duties. Ashram duties are generally according to age. When you're young, you're a student. In the prime of life, you have a family and a career. In middle age, you retire. In old age, you prepare for death. So this is, again, a melding of what are our natural desires,
Mm-hmm.
our natural inclinations,
Mm-hmm.
and the Lord saying, for these natural inclinations, this is the way to execute them in my service.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just what do I feel like, and it's not just what am I being assigned. And Guru is supposed to, Prabhupada says, give us duties also according to our nature. There should be this harmony
Mm-hmm.
between. So I just wanted to make sure I made that point as well.
Sure, sure, Mataji. Glad you did so. So, Mataji, the motivation behind work, everybody is interested in what's in it for me, and the whole world is encouraging us to work towards success, happiness, and the world has its own definition of both success and happiness. So, either we are working for ourselves, or maybe for our families, or communities, or maybe even the nation. But in Krishna consciousness, we call this expanded selfishness. And here we are saying the art of working for Krishna. So, don't work for yourself and don't work for any of these entities. Work exclusively for the satisfaction of Krishna and Guru. So why should I work for Krishna? Why should I strive to satisfy Krishna? What's in it for me by doing this, by making this shift?
Prabhupada would say that that is our real self-interest.
Mm.
And again, we're going to go right back to the analogy
Mm-hmm.
of a cell in the body, or a part of
Mm-hmm.
the body. So why should my hand work for the body? Well, that's what's best for my hand as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that either my hand works for itself or it works for the body. By working for the body, it does work for itself,
Mm-hmm.
but it's working directly for the body, and it then become
Mm-hmm.
nourished. And you could also say that keeping my hands healthy is good for the body.
Mm-hmm.
Just like where I am right now, it's winter, the air is very dry.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't put some kind of lotion on my hands a few times a day, my fingers will literally start to crack.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something, and my hands are putting the lotion on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
My hands are directly serving themselves. So my hands are indirectly serving themselves by my hand putting healthy food in my body.
Mm-hmm.
That healthy food nourishes the hands. Then my hands also take the lotion and directly rub them on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But why? For the good of the whole body. So there really isn't this kind of dichotomy. It
Mm-hmm.
may appear superficially for someone who's actually in Krishna consciousness, again, it may appear superficially, oh, this thing I'm doing just for Krishna and it's not for me, and this thing I'm doing just for me. But it's not like that. Whether
Mm-hmm.
my hand is putting food into the mouth or whether my hand is rubbing lotion on itself,
Mm-hmm.
both of those things are for the health of the body. Like Prabhupada would say, if my hand was, God forbid, cut off, if I just have a hand there,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be rubbing lotion on a disconnected hand.
Mm-hmm.
There's no need to
Mm-hmm.
make my hand healthy if my hand was separate from the body.
Mm-hmm.
So even things that appear that I'm doing for myself, we actually need to keep ourselves healthy, to help keep ourselves healthy physically, mentally, psychologically. Like Prabhupada says, marriage is for making the mind peaceful. And in general, this is true. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this kind of thing. So I know if I want to serve Krishna, I have to get enough sleep. I have to eat food that's healthy for me. I have to eat food that I'm going to be able to digest. That's going to be healthy for me. I have to have the kind of loving relationships and support systems that are actually going to take care of me. If I don't have that, I can't serve Krishna. Just like if my hands don't have lotion, they'll crack and I won't be able to type. It'll be hard to hold my beads. I won't really be able to function. But the mentality of everything should be to please the senses of Krishna, not to please my senses directly, even when it appears that, well, I'm working directly from my senses. And it's not like a mundane dictator who is, or an exploiter who is forcing people to work for him or her without caring for the workers. This sort of exploitation is something we see. We may have encountered it in our personal life, but it's certainly something that we can read about in the news and in history. So there are people all around us
Mm.
who try to get their own satisfaction by exploiting others.
Mm.
And if they can't force the others, they'll try to manipulate them by saying, you should give up your own desires and work for the greater cause.
Mm.
And we may associate Krishna with that. And we may therefore think, well, if I want to please Krishna, I have to act like some self-abnegating slave,
Mm.
just working for Krishna. And you see that people who do this, they're not really worshiping Krishna, because Krishna is not a nasty person.
Mm.
They're worshiping an imagined God, and actually an evil God.
Mm.
And so they're not really satisfying Krishna at all.
Mm.
Find that people who work like that, they burn out.
Mm.
They can't maintain it for long periods of time, and they may become embittered. They may become embittered at their guru, at the ISKCON society in general, sometimes with Srila Prabhupada,
Mm.
sometimes with God himself,
Mm.
that they feel, well, I gave everything and I worked everything, and then I just became burned out and I didn't get
Mm.
anything. But actually their whole concept of God was wrong.
Mm.
The whole thing was skewed.
Mm.
So Krishna's not asking us to work for him in that sense at all,
Mm.
but it's more like a family
Mm.
where everyone works for the good of the family, and everybody works for the good of everybody in the family.
Mm.
If it's a functional family, if
Mm.
it's a psychologically healthy family,
Mm.
and every member of the family wants to see that every other member of the family is happy and healthy and has what they need. The parents give toys to the children to play
Mm.
with, you know, that have no value immediately to the family as a whole. The parents are spending their money buying toys for their children.
Mm.
Why? Because they care about their children. And
Mm.
also they know that this is good playing is for the healthy development of their child on every level, socially, psychologically, and so forth,
Mm.
by which the child will be able to contribute to the family.
Mm.
So there's not really this sort of choice. The choice that's there is, do I try to exploit the Lord for my purposes? Or do I try to serve the Lord? That's the choice. The
Mm.
choice isn't, do I do anything for myself or not?
Mm. Mm.
Because if I see myself as part of the Lord, then I can also take care of myself as part of my service.
Mm.
So a materialistic person doesn't see the Lord.
Mm.
They're not aware of the Lord, and they're thinking, oh, here I am in this place. Everything here is for me to enjoy and for me to exploit.
Mm.
Uh, that is what we want to give up.
Mhm, mhm. So, Mataji, very wonderfully you have explained what to do and why to do. Now, if you
Mm.
can please enlighten us on how to do, because in 18th chapter, Krishna talks about three types of action and three types of performers of action in Sattva Guna, Rajoguna, and Tamoguna. So, if you can maybe with examples tell us how to do work for Krishna.
Okay. Well, we want to get above the gunas. Nistrigunya Bhavarjuna is something that the Lord tells Arjuna in the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita.
Mhm,
And workers in Tamagun tend to be lazy and insulting,
mhm,
procrastinating. In Rajagun, they tend to be envious
mhm,
and very moved by joy and sorrow when things go right. They're, oh, I did that. Things go wrong. They're depressed, and
mhm,
and people in Sattvagun, they're very steady
mhm,
and they're focused primarily on liberation. Now,
mhm,
these three kinds of ego are very interesting. They're all really different types or extents of false ego.
mhm,
In Kriya Dharma, we call them the shades of ego. And
mhm,
we say Tamagun is like a dark curtain on a window.
mhm,
Rajagun is like a sheer curtain on a window.
mhm,
Sattvagun is like a clear window, no curtain.
mhm,
Being in Krishna consciousness is like being outside.
mhm.
I remember one time being in a classroom that had glass doors, and it looked like the room was full of light. But when someone opened the doors and we could see directly outside, we saw there was a difference even with that. So in Tamagun, the mood is, I'll do the right thing if it's easy. I'll be a good person if it's easy.
Mm.
Predominant motivation in Tamagun is ease
Mm.
and comfort and immediacy.
Okay.
So if something's a little bit of trouble, someone in Tamagun won't do it.
Mm.
If you I give the example of someone's watching the television, and when the show's over, if the remote controls, if they have to get up to get the remote control, they'll just watch the next show.
Yeah.
They're not going to take the trouble to get up and walk a few meters.
Mm. Mm.
So that's kind of the essence of Tamagun.
Okay.
And a worker in Tamagun is just sees the work, as Krishna describes. Their knowledge doesn't extend beyond that.
Mm.
I'm a farmer, I'm a steel worker, I'm a banker. All they can think about is their work. It's very much akin to animal life.
Mm.
It's very, very close to animal life that
Mm.
I want a comfortable house, and I want to have food, and I want to have facility, for
Mm.
eating, sleeping, mating, and defending in whatever's the easiest way possible. And without really considering the consequences of what they're doing at all.
Mm.
Then Rajagun is very much, Krishna says that knowledge in Rajagun is you see different kinds of living entities. So you think, okay, these are Indians, these are Americans, these are Ukrainians, these are Russians, these are Palestinians, these are Israelis. And I'm part of this group.
Mm.
I'm a Ukrainian, so I'm going to fight against Russia. And I'm a Russian, so I'm going to fight against the Ukrainians.
Mm.
I'm a human, that's an animal, so I'm going to kill it and eat it. You're seeing in this separatist way.
Mm.
And in Rajagun, you have a pride of that you're a very hardworking person.
Mm.
So Tamagun has this laziness about it, and Rajagun has this kind of ambition about it.
Mm.
That, I want to be a big something in the world. I
Mm.
want my name to be in the history books. I want my
Mm.
statue in the park. I, what's motivating people is pride and prestige. How are you admiring me? So a
Mm.
Rajagun person, a Tamagun person will be forgiving if it's easy. It doesn't cost him anything. A
Mm.
Rajagun person will be forgiving at great cost to themselves.
Mm.
So people will say, "Oh, what a forgiving person you are."
Mm.
Tamagun people will be religious if it's easy.
Mm.
And Rajagun people will be religious with great effort in
Mm.
order to be looked up to. Oh, what a religious person that is.
Mm.
They're very proud of their sacrifices. They're very proud of their hard work.
Mm.
And Tamagun people basically are never really happy in any real sense.
Mm.
Rajagun people get fleeting sensory happiness.
Mm.
When their activities are successful and they get the good food, or they get the romantic partner they want, or they get the new car or whatever, then they have some temporary sensory happiness and some temporary mental happiness that, oh, what a hard worker I am, what a good provider, what a moral. Rajagun people tend to be very moral and very ethical
Mm.
for the praise of others.
Mm.
Then the ego in Sattvagun is a kind of harmony.
Mm.
I want to be in harmony. And Rajagun people see Sattvagun people as lazy, by the way,
Mm.
or into some kind of, spiritual sort of thing. The Sattvagun people are really into harmony, and they want to be forgiving because it makes them feel good inside. It makes them feel like, oh, I'm a good person. They don't
Mm.
care whether or not somebody else praises them for that,
Mm.
but they're still self-motivated.
Mm.
But like, I want to be in harmony. I want to be forgiving because it just gives me this sense of joy, and
Mm.
it gives me a sense of peace, and it gives me this sense of satisfaction.
Mm.
And Sattvagun people are very detached from the ups and downs of the world. They're very detached from the praise of the world. They're actually not lazy at
Mhm.
all,
Mhm.
but they're not ambitious.
Mm.
They don't care whether or not their name's ever in the history book. It doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is this inner sense of harmony.
Mm.
So in all cases, you have an ego.
Mhm.
One is, I just do things that are easy. I'm not some foolish person running around after fame in the world. And the other is, I'm a builder of society. And the other is, I am a spiritual, harmonious person. So all of those are I-centered.
Mhm.
They're all egotistical.
Mhm.
Now, Sattva Gun is more conducive for spirituality than Rajas or Tamas, and Rajas is more conducive than Tamas. And Rajas people tend to be moral, ethical people in the world.
Mhm.
Like if you want to talk about a civilized human society, that's going to be primarily in Rajas. And Tamas people are, they can, if they're extreme Tamas, they become criminals even. And they're a problem. So we want to go beyond all of those. We want to work beyond these three categories of workers, these three categories of work, these three categories that Krishna is giving over and over are given to us so that we can look in the mirror and say, am I being controlled by one of these modes of
Mhm.
nature?
Mhm.
Now, bhakti is on a different level.
Mhm.
Bhakti, we're working out of love for the Lord,
Mhm.
not for our own egotistical idea of ourself.
Mhm.
And in bhakti, everything should be play and joy.
Mhm.
Everything should feel like a dance. Prabhupada says to work with a thrill, not just once, but at every moment.
Mhm.
And in Bhakti, in one, we see that the world is the dream of Mahavishnu.
Mhm.
Everything here is temporary. It's real, but it's temporary. And this world is only meaningful as it's employed in the service of the Lord. So we have kind of a humorous detachment from the world, not the
Mhm.
detachment of Sattvagun, but a playful detachment.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we see that everything is ultimately good. God is all good. God is all merciful. The so-called good things, the so-called bad things, they're all actually good because they're all controlled by the Lord.
Mhm.
And, in Tamagun, you only see your work. In Rajagun, you see different kinds of living entities. In Sattvagun, you see everyone is spiritual. But beyond that, we see that everyone is a part of Krishna.
Mhm.
Now, we are going to deal with other people differently on a practical level, but we have compassion and love for everyone.
Mhm.
And again, we see everything as Leela. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about this, that this
Mhm.
material is also the Leela of the Lord.
Mhm.
And we see that in Mahaprabhu's movement, we are actually part of the Lord's Leela,
Mhm.
if we choose to see it that way.
Mhm.
If we choose to see it that way.
Mhm.
Just like you could be at a party, at a festival, and you could choose to be morose and non-participatory.
Mhm. Mhm.
You can go to a feast and not eat anything. I mean, it we have to make that choice. Do I want to be a participant in the Lord's Leela? Do I want to see my life as an adventure? Do I
Mhm.
want to see that, I'm Krishna's servant and he's taking me where he wants, how he wants.
Mhm.
I am reciprocating also with my own desires in service.
Mhm.
And that way we are detached from the ups and downs of this world. I
Mhm.
mean, our body and mind are going to be affected, but we are detached from the effects on our body and mind.
Mhm.
And we just observe them. Oh, look at that. My
Mhm.
mind and body are grieving. My mind and body are tired. My mind and body are angry. My mind and body are happy and whatever. But here I am
Mhm.
in my in participation in the Lord's pastimes. What does he want me to do?
Mhm.
How can I make his pastimes more beautiful? How can
Mhm.
I contribute to his glory in the world?
Mhm. Brilliant, Mataji. So, Mataji, one of my favorite interviews of yours, I think you did it sometime around like 2013 or something, Successful Vaishnavas with Krishnendu Prabhu, I believe. It's one of my favorites. It's in two parts. I constantly revisit that. So, in the present day culture, people talk about grinding, hustle, work 24 bar 7, burnout, this, that. And here you are, you finished your master's and PhD both in 3 years while being a full time mom and serving and so many things. And your Learn to Read, Dr. Best Learn to Read, 83 books, you finished that project in like 3 years. It's not just about being so productive, but like you were talking about your Learn to Read series of books, you didn't even know if it was going to be anything more than just documents on your computer.
Yes,
And you
yes.
had like 12-hour days, 14-hour days. You have these deadlines to meet. In between, you are not well. You have to go get your treatment and uh, looking for funds and so many things. So how can we stay like this, like you are active, you're working for Krishna, but at the same time it's not like the hustle culture that people talk about where we are so attached to the results. Even if there is no, you're looking for a different kind of a result. In fact, you said through that project you went to a place where you had never been before. You
Yes,
completely let go of the result and you were like completely absorbed in the moment, just like what you said, that moment to moment thrill connection with Krishna. So please
yes.
talk a little bit about this, Mataji.
Well, that experience of doing Learn to Read was very revolutionary and revelatory for me.
Mm-hmm.
When I started the project, I mean, I had a little bit of savings, but no income.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in my life, I mean, since then, a lot of people have come forward to donate for different projects.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, that wasn't happening in the beginning. I mean, we had Sitaram Prabhu in London gave some donations. He gave a donation to get me training at the Institute of Education in London
Mm-hmm.
and to print 10 copies of one book to show people. And then the Auckland Temple let me stay in one of their what they called units.
Mm-hmm.
So there were some people helping, but initially, I wasn't really getting like a flood of help in terms of money or manpower.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't had experience doing this before, so I didn't have contacts. Uh, it was at first, it was quite overwhelming. And the first 2 weeks of that project, I didn't get anything done at all. I felt completely stymied.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, Krishna's giving me this facility. I should use it. You know?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had no hope. I really had, on a practical level, uh, external level, the chances that this project would ever come to fruition were
Mm-hmm.
close to zero.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't have any of the means to do that. So I would just dedicate constantly dedicate everything to Prabhupada. And I have my Govardhan Shila, and I would dedicate everything to Giriraj and to Srila Prabhupada. This is for you. This is for you. This is for you. This is for you. This is for
Mm-hmm.
you. And just in order, Krishna is so funny. In order for me to be motivated, and
Mm-hmm.
in order for me to be sane, and in order for me to be happy, my only way to do that was to take pleasure in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I focused on a result, I would have stopped.
Yeah.
As I said, the first 2 weeks, I was blocked. I just like had some kind of an internal block
Mm-hmm.
because the whole thing just seemed so completely ridiculous. And I was like, what am I doing this for? It's never going to come to anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, well, how am I going to do this? So during that time, I mean, as time went on,
Mm-hmm.
people did come forward. You know, I found an artist. One of the devotees there said, I'll pay the artist. Then the school paid for me to go to China.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up meeting with a wonderful donor in Brisbane. He was the first major donor.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw the sample book and he said, will this help you? And gave me $10,000. And so that was enough to pay all the devotee artists in China. So people started coming forward and a lot of volunteers started coming forward. Altogether, over 200 people internationally ended up working on the.
Wow.
But even like, our oldest son was doing the layout. And I remember at one point he was doing that as a volunteer. Some people we had to pay, other people we paid some amount, and some people were volunteering.
Mm-hmm.
I remember him saying to me, Mata, are you sure this is actually going to get published? This is a lot of work, Laying out 83 books is a lot of work.
Yes.
And I said, well, I'm doing my best to get it published, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have the money to publish. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't have experience like that with publishing. And then Mantralingua came forward and they said, hey, we can put sound in this, which was
Mm-hmm.
an technology. I mean, Krishna just kept giving all of this. And it just kept unfolding. But there were also blocks and difficulties and false
Mm-hmm.
starts and, things that looked like they would work that didn't and
Mm-hmm.
promises that get kept. And
Mm-hmm.
but altogether, it was pretty interesting. I remember at one point I got an email from someone who called himself Servant 108. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, I don't know what you're doing, but I want to donate to it. I'm like, well, okay, whatever.
Wow.
This was in London. And then a few days later, one of the brahmacharis came up to me. I don't even remember his name. And he
Mm,
hands me an envelope. He said, "This is from Servant 108." And it had 1,200 pounds in it, British
mm,
pounds. And I'm thinking, okay, Krishna, what exactly do I do with this? And like 2 days later, I was meeting with one devotee and I said, this project is getting so big
mm,
that I can't manage it myself anymore. I said, I need someone else to help me be a project manager. And
mm,
he said, well, I could do that. He said, but my wife won't let me work for free anymore.
mm.
And I said, well, how much do you need? And he said, 1,200 pounds.
Wow. Wow.
I
Wow.
kind of already have that in my bag.
Oh my God. Mm,
So that kind of thing just kept happening. But
mm,
and again, not always. Sometimes it was the
mm,
opposite. Sometimes
mm,
people would say, I'll do this, and then they wouldn't.
mm,
But what I did was, and I might have talked about this on the podcast, on
mm,
the one you're referring to,
mhm,
what I started doing was frequently throughout every day when I was working, I would envision that Radha Krishna and their associates were looking at the finished books
mm,
and laughing and smiling in happiness. And I was doing this from the time that everything was just, Word files on my computer,
mm,
and I didn't have any artists and any donation and nothing.
mm,
I mean, I did have the support of the school there,
mhm,
but I really didn't have like any ongoing help.
mm,
So I started just regularly, many times a day, just getting this picture in my mind. Radha Krishna and their associates are looking, they're kind of passing around the finished books. And
oh,
again, in re, in the external plane, there were no books. There
mm,
were no pictures even.
mm,
There wasn't even finalized text.
mm,
It was just a doc, just
mm,
a series
mm,
of thoughts
mm,
on my computer screen. But I kept that in mind as we went forward. I wouldn't say it every moment, but it was many times a day, every day, as I was
mm,
working on it. I would make this mental picture
mm,
and I would offer that to the Lord. Lord,
mm,
this is for you. This is for your happiness. May you and your associates find pleasure in this.
mm,
So at the very end, right before the books were printed, and we were meeting with Mantralingua in London, which was
mhm,
arranged by Sitaram Prabhu,
mhm,
and Rabin Datta and his sister Misty decided that they would publish the books at their own expense, that they
mm,
would to it. So we decided we were going to put them in 3 boxes.
mm,
And he was engaging his employees in designing a cover picture for the box. So these employees were, regular Britishers, not at all Hare Krishna devotees, not
mm,
even and we had some photographs we had taken of children looking at, because we had like done like run a few runs of the books as like samples.
mm,
So we had some photographs we'd taken of children looking at like these sample books.
mm,
Okay, then we had the illustrations from the books. And this one graphic artist working for Mantralingua decided that she wanted to combine for the covers the photographs of the children looking at the books with the illustrations from the books.
okay.
So we had only one book about gopis called I Look for My Krishna, and
Mm,
it was Radha and Chitra Gopi
oh,
looking for Krishna when he disappears from the Ras dance. And
mm,
in one of the pictures, they're looking at Krishna's footprints. So they're trying to follow Krishna's
oh,
footprints, looking down at the footprints, and their hands are like this.
oh,
So she had taken for one of the boxes, she had taken Radha and Chitra Gopis
mhm,
looking at children
oh,
reading the book.
oh my
Now, I
God.
had not communicated to anyone at
Mm,
any time what
mm,
my internal picture
mm,
was.
mm,
So this young woman, graphic artist, no connection with Krishna consciousness, no connection with India, nothing at all.
mm,
She comes in and shows us this is my design, and I saw in front of me
mm,
on the cover of the box
mm,
a picture very much like what I had had in my mind for 3 years.
mm, wow.
And my takeaway from that,
Mhm.
it's like that Brahmana who was offering meditation in his mind and Krishna accepted it,
Um,
is when we're offering something to Krishna like that,
mhm,
it's accepted.
Mm.
Whether or not that offering ever happens externally, I mean, I was fortunate in this case, it did happen externally.
Mm.
Some of the things in my life have not come to
Mm.
fruition externally. But
Mhm.
whether or not it comes externally, Krishna is accepting it.
Mm.
And when those books were actually printed, and when we went into Mantralinga's office and saw the piles of boxes,
Mm.
the happiness I felt then was not any different from the
Mm.
happiness I felt sitting alone in New Zealand, looking at my screen at a doc file
Mm.
before there was any money or help or
Mm.
support.
Mm.
It was the same.
Mm.
And I didn't feel this, I didn't feel a pride of accomplishment.
Mm.
Felt like it was Krishna working through me.
Mm.
And every step there was this connection. So that particular experience just revolutionized my understanding of what
Mm.
does it mean to work in Krishna consciousness? What
Wow.
does it mean to work with detachment from the results? What does it mean to live life with a thrill at every moment? What is it? And I went through, I mean, I had several times during that time when I was very sick. During that time, I broke my foot. I mean, all kinds of
Mm.
interesting things happened during those 3 years.
Mm.
But that's how it works.
Mm.
So
Mm.
if I, who's a very imperfect and struggling and whatever a person trying to be a devotee in this world, if I could experience that, I'm convinced that anyone can experience that. And such is the real art of work. That's a detachment from the result. Now, it might look to somebody from the outside
Mhm.
that it's a hustle.
Mm. Mm.
Somebody might look at it externally,
Mm.
say, wow, you're working as much as somebody who's trying to make their first million or whatever.
Mm.
But the inner experience is not like that at all.
Mm.
And one doesn't work in such a way that one damages one's body and mind.
Mm.
One doesn't work in such a way that one's, what do they call work-life balance
Mm.
gets. I
Mm.
mean, there was one time in that where there was an emergency and I needed to do that for a few days, but
Yes.
uh, that was a very temporary thing, not some way that I'd want to work
Mm.
all the
Mm. So, Mataji, would you have been equally happy if those books were not published? I think so. Yes.
time. Well, I think the main disappointment I would have had if they weren't published were how many other people put so much effort into
Um,
it.
mm.
Like my son saying to me, "Is this ever going to be published?"
Mm. Mm.
And I couldn't at that time give him a guarantee. But
Mm.
if I couldn't say that it was fairly certain, why should he do it?
Yeah.
So you do have this situation where you're engaging other people
Mm-hmm.
where you don't want to waste their time and energy. You don't want to ask them to do something
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to lead to a tangible project.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, you can't guarantee a tangible product
Mm.
project.
Mm.
So, I do try to be very, very careful that when I ask help from other people,
Mhm, mhm,
that I've got some reasonable
mm.
assurance. So that is difficult.
Okay.
But for myself, I mean, I don't know. I've worked on so many things that haven't
Mm.
resulted in, maybe it's resulted in something.
Mhm,
In some cases, it's resulted in nothing. I mean, there are things
mm.
I've worked on that have gone literally nowhere,
Mm.
that I've put a lot of time and effort into and never got used by anybody for anything at all. So
Mm.
there are definitely things like that. And then there are things somewhere in the middle where I put a tremendous amount of time and energy into it
Mm.
and done something that I thought was really first class,
Mm.
and where it got used by a few people sometimes.
Mm.
I
Mm.
mean, one example of that is a course I worked on to train Gurukul administrators, a
Mhm,
30-hour administrative training course that I worked on with the encouragement and the cooperation of the Ministry of Education.
mhm.
And then after it was finished, they said, "Oh, we don't know when we can schedule this."
Oh.
And it never ended up being taught as a ministry course.
Mm.
So I think I've taught it twice
Mhm, mhm,
to school administrators, and I've taught parts of it
Mm,
So that would be something, I mean, in that case, I didn't really I involved one other person slightly.
mm,
Uh, sure, you'd like to see it successful,
mhm,
but the process of working on it was also service, even if it doesn't end up
mm,
externally being what I wanted it to be.
mm,
And those sort of circumstances, or even more so, the circumstances where you put a lot of time and energy into something and it doesn't go anywhere at all.
mm, mm,
Uh, and that has also happened to me, that I really put a lot of effort into something and nothing happened with it. It went
mm,
nowhere. I mean, generally that wouldn't be 3 years, but I did spend at one point one whole year with the committee
mhm,
working on curriculum projects that never came to fruition.
mm,
It was it was funded, and then at the end we were told that we were going to get 5 to 10 years of funding, so we had a 5 to 10 year plan,
mhm.
and the funding dried up after the end of the year. And
Oh,
so um, because we had made a 5 year plan, when
mm,
the funding dried up after a year, we had a lot of unfinished things.
mm,
One of my takeaways from that would be was uh, not to count on long-term funding,
mhm, mhm,
and to try to have projects with shorter
mm,
duration. But I think also my experience with that kind of thing brought me to meditate on service that was pleasing to Krishna, although externally it was a failure.
mm,
And I bring this up, quite a number of times in my classes, where I'll ask people, where in the Shastra or in our history do we find where there was an external failure,
mhm,
but Krishna was pleased?
mm,
I mean, my prime examples are Prabhupada trying to start a center in Jhansi.
mhm,
That was a failure.
mhm.
Uh, I asked people, are we happy that Prabhupada failed in Jhansi? And everybody says, yes, we're very happy that
Mm,
failed in Jhansi, but it
mm,
was a failure.
mm,
I mean, it definitely was a failure.
mm,
Prabhupada also tried working with one of the Gaudiya Maths in Delhi. That was also a failure.
mm,
And again, it's a failure we're happy about. It pushed Prabhupada to leave India and come to America, which he
mm,
might not have done otherwise.
mm,
And Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati mostly pushed him just to preach in English to English-speaking people,
mm,
and not so much to physically go to the West.
mm,
I mean, Prabhupada went to the West because he saw that his guru had sent people to London.
mm.
We're talking about orders and initiative again.
Correct, correct. Mm.
The order was preach in English to English-speaking people.
Yes,
That was the order.
right.
Prabhupada going to New York was his own initiative.
Um,
That Prabhupada saw, oh, my guru sent disciples to London. He actually wants to establish branches of his institution in Western countries. And then Prabhupada himself explains that, oh, well, I'm seeing people are not so much following the British anymore, they're following the Americans. So I should go to America rather than to Great Britain. So that was his own initiative. Another example I give of failure is Jatayu, who
mm,
tried to stop Ravana and kill Ravana.
mm,
I mean, he was successful in the sense that he was able to tell Ram that it was Ravana who took Sita,
mm,
but he was defeated, but was not able to stop Ravana.
mm,
So it was a failure.
mm,
Another example I like to give of failures is the cowherd men who were taking care of the cows on top of Govardhan Hill,
mm,
when calves that were actually Krishna were at the bottom of the hill.
mm,
And when the cows saw these calves that were actually Krishna, they raced down the hill. And
mm,
Govardhan knows that it would be pretty difficult to run down Govardhan Hill,
mm,
especially if you're a cow.
mm,
I mean, maybe if you're a goat, you could do it, but it would be hard or a monkey. But for a human, it would be difficult, and for a cow, it would be difficult. And the men were used to controlling their cows. And when they come down the hill, it says they were baffled and angry and frustrated because, look, these are pure devotees. They're kind of used to things working out for them.
mm,
Their general experience in life is that all their desires are fulfilled and that all their service works out nicely. So
mm,
they were really, really upset about this, that they
mm,
failed to keep the cows at the top of the hill.
mm,
Of course, their failure was very pleasing to Krishna because it demonstrated to the world how much the cows loved him.
mm.
the cows loved him so much
Mhm.
that they were willing to run away from their herding cowherd men.
Mhm.
They were willing to run over the boulders on Govardhan Hill. That they were willing to overcome all obstacles. And of course, when the cowherd men actually saw their sons, who were Krishna
Mhm.
at that time, they were overwhelmed with affection. So I often get, I can't think of any right now, but when I ask audience, they think of other examples.
Mhm.
And to remember that when something appears to be a failure externally,
Mhm.
others, whether something is an external failure or an external success is not the measure of Krishna's happiness.
Mhm. Mhm.
There are many, many people in the world who are very, very, very externally successful at what they're doing, and it has nothing to do with Krishna's happiness.
Mhm.
So the external results are not the indicator of whether or not Krishna's pleased. And I see that the failures that I've undergone were
Mhm.
so that I would go deeply into that understanding. I mean, I've also had to look, another sort of in between thing is things I've done that were very successful for a while. So I
Mhm.
had projects that were very successful for maybe 10 years,
Mhm.
and then they stopped,
Mhm.
they closed, they were finished.
Mhm.
So that also looking and saying everything is temporary.
Mhm.
We might want to measure success by it's still going on when I die,
Mhm. Mhm.
because then we can have the illusion that it's going to be eternal.
Mhm.
Well, if I die and it's happening, it's good, but it's not. Whether something lasts for 2 years or 20 years or 200 years or 2000 years,
Mhm.
everything is temporary. And from Krishna's point of view, 2000 years and 2 years really isn't that much different.
Mhm.
So whether something is a resounding success for 2000 years, whether it's a partial success, whether it's a great success temporarily,
Mhm.
whether it's a very, very, very minor success, or whether it's a failure externally,
Mhm.
it is not really the source of our happiness. Now, in Sattva Gun, one is detached from all these kinds of things. But in
Mhm.
Sattva Gun, one is detached from all these kinds of things, again, out of a sense of ego that I am very detached.
Mhm.
Just see how detached I am.
Mhm.
And in Bhakti, one is detached because one sees that Krishna has his plan with all of these.
Mhm.
Everything is actually a success because
Mhm.
it's all contributing to Krishna's Leela and
Mhm.
his purpose, which we may or may not see at the moment.
Mhm.
And my so-called failure or my so-called limited success, if Krishna is pleased and he integrates it into his divine plan, is perfect.
Mhm.
And that's our detachment as bhakti yogis.
Mhm. Mhm. So inspiring, Mataji. So, Mataji, you said the measure of success is Krishna pleased. So, how do I know if Krishna is pleased? Like in Bhagavatam, Kunti Maharani offers such amazing prayers, then he smiles. Okay, we know he's pleased. The queen, the Hastinapura ladies, the ladies of Hastinapura, they go on the roof and they are glorifying him. He just glances over them. We know he's pleased. But I don't see his glance. I don't see his smile. So, how
Okay,
do
well,
I know he's
this
pleased?
is, this is going to circle back to what we talked about before.
Uh-huh.
If what you're doing is approved by Shastra,
Mm,
if what you're doing is approved by sadhu, if what
mm,
you're doing is approved by guru, and that
mm,
that can be an order or blessings. It doesn't have to just be an order. It
mm,
can be blessings.
mm. Okay.
And, and
Mhm,
if your subjective experience
mhm,
is that you're feeling, as Prabhupada would quote this 11th canto verse,
mm,
pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger.
mm,
If you're feeling pleasure, nourishment, and relief from material attachment, if you're
mhm,
feeling kosher to Krishna, now you don't want to look at just the subjective
mhm,
because we can fool ourselves, and
mhm,
you don't want to look at just the objective because it might not apply to you. In
mm,
other words, there might be something that's approved by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, but it's not what you should be doing
mhm,
or not what you should be doing now.
mm,
Like Srila Goswami saying, everyone should live at Radhakund. Who is the fool who's not going to worship Radhakund? And
mm,
so you're going to read that and say, oh my goodness, Guru Sadhu Shastra, let me get on a plane.
mm, mm,
I actually know someone who did that. I was giving a presentation of a virtual tour through Radhakund.
Mm.
And this person was in Europe, and it was May when it's very hot in India. And this
Mm.
person says, "Oh, I got to go to Radhakund." And they get on a plane and they go to Radhakund, and then they get sick from the sudden change in
Mm.
climate.
Mm.
And could you imagine if everybody associated with the Hare Krishna movement immediately went to Radhakund tomorrow?
Mm.
It would damage the whole ecosystem there.
Mm.
We it wouldn't be able to tolerate, and then
Mm.
all of our other preaching would stop. So
Mm.
that wouldn't please Krishna at all.
Mm.
So it's got to be both. And for subjective, I mean, Prabhupada uses that verse from the 11th canto for subjective,
Mhm.
pleasure, nourishment, and relief from hunger.
Mhm.
I also like to use Bhagavad Gita 9 too. Raja Vijaya Rajaguyam
Mm.
Pavitram Idam Uttamam Pratyaksham Bhagavam Dharmam Susukam Kartamabhiyam.
Mhm.
Raja Vijaya, are you being filled with knowledge, with realization, with understanding? Rajaguyam, are you able to understand the essence of things?
Mm.
What you're doing help you to understand the essence of things.
Mm.
Pavitra, are you feeling purified? This is one of Prabhupada's main criteria. Are
Mm.
you feeling materially detached?
Mm. Mm.
Pratyaksha, are you directly experiencing it?
Mm.
It's not like I'm supposed to be making advancements, so I guess I am.
Mm.
Agamam dharmam.
Mm.
Dharma means that which is authentic. So
Mhm.
I always give this analogy
Mhm.
because I had a very dramatic experience when I was like 20 or 21,
Mhm.
that we can tell the difference between organic, locally grown, tree ripened fruit
Mm.
and a chemically flavored artificial fruit drink.
Mm.
We can tell what's authentic.
Mm. Mm.
If you get a tree ripened, locally grown organic mango and you
Mm.
compare that to, a mango flavored chemical syrup,
Mhm.
you can tell the difference.
Mm.
So Dharma, you can tell it's authentic. Susukam, you become happy.
Mm. Mm.
So it's like, if you ask the question, how can a cell in my lung know
Mm.
if my body is healthy?
Mm.
How can a cell in my lung know that its work is contributing to the health of the body? They're
Mm.
reciprocal.
Mm.
If my bodily cells are happy, then my body as a whole is happy. And if my body as a whole is happy, it's
Mm.
felt in all the cells of my body.
Mm.
I
Mm.
mean, this process is so extreme for one who's really in transcendence that their body stops really being material at all.
Mm. Mm.
If a person is fully Krishna conscious,
Mm.
then their body becomes spiritualized.
Mm.
So that would mean that every cell in their body is experiencing a different type of existence.
Mm.
Therefore, we don't burn the bodies of great saints
Mm.
because their body is acting spiritually.
Mm. Mm.
So it's experienced. So
Mm.
Krishna is pleased if what you're doing is according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and you should be able to document that.
Mhm. Mhm.
It shouldn't be something, well, I think it's pleasing to them.
Mm.
That's your objective measure. And
Mhm.
then you have your subjective measure.
Mm.
What's happening in my life?
Mm. Mm.
I was once at a meeting where Shanika Rishi, who runs the Oxford Center for Hindu Studies,
Mhm.
I don't remember exactly what it was in relationship to, but he said something like, when we get into this or we talk about this or whatever it was, he said, we all forget about the little blue boy playing his flute. And I went, oh my goodness, he's right.
Mm.
How do I know if Krishna's smiling? Am I aware of him?
Mm.
If I'm all wrapped up in talking about, the latest war and the latest politician and the latest this and the latest that, and I'm disturbed and I'm not joyful, I'm not full of knowledge, and I have no recollection of the little blue boy playing his flute. I'm
Mm.
not pleasing Krishna.
Mm.
It's 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 not that hard. Again, you don't want subjectivity entirely.
Mm. Mm.
Because subjectivity entirely, we can be fooled by our mind and we can do some deviant something. So
Mm.
both have to be.
So, Mataji, what is the role of taking risks for Krishna? Prabhupada took the greatest risk with hardly anything. He went to the West. So Krishna says surrender, but how do I surrender with that level of trust? You said it's an adventure. I don't know how it's all going to play out. I'm supposed to take
Well,
risks.
that's what an adventure means, that you don't know how it's going to.
Yeah. So,
I mean, look, when people, what do they call it? Spoilers.
mhm.
If you're going to go see a movie, you don't want a spoiler. You don't want to know how it's going to turn out,
Yes. Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Otherwise, there's no fun. So yeah, even Krishna sometimes pretends that he doesn't know how
Mm,
it's going to.
mm,
Or it's interesting, Krishna expands as Balaram, and sometimes Krishna knows and Balaram doesn't.
mm,
So it's like, Krishna already knows how it's going to turn out, and Balaram doesn't know what's going on.
mm,
Both of those experiences at the same time. As
mhm.
far as taking risks, so risk taking is one of the criteria in personality studies,
Okay.
that some of us are inherently more cautious and some of us are inherently more risk takers. Now,
Mm,
you can't be 100% cautious or you would never get out of bed. And
mm,
you can't be 100% risk taker or you wouldn't live one day.
mm,
You know, we have to have a combination of caution and risk taking in order to function in the world.
mm, mm,
Because in one sense, every step I take, everything I do is a risk.
mhm,
And in another sense, I don't want to cross the street with my eyes closed and I
mm,
want to have some caution. But each of us tends to lean more towards one or the other.
mm,
And we should actually do service accordingly.
mhm,
So when I teach this, I ask people, give me examples of cautious people in each of the three modes and in bhakti, and
mm,
risk-taking people in each of the three modes and in
mm,
bhakti, that we don't want to turn cautious people into risk takers or risk takers into cautious people,
okay.
but we use that in bhakti. So, the person doing the temple accounts, do you want that to be a cautious person or a risk-taking person?
Cautious, definitely.
Exactly. And if there's a devotee going to preach in China or Saudi Arabia, you want a cautious or risk-taking person.
Risk taking.
Exactly. So we should be engaged accordingly.
Mm,
We should take service. If we're a risk-taking person, we should be engaged in the kind of services that involve more of a tolerance and even an appetite for risk.
mhm,
And if we're naturally a cautious person, we should be involved in services that require a great deal of caution.
okay.
So that's both there.
Mm,
And uh, I don't see that surrender to Krishna is related to what extent I'm wired to be cautious or risk-taking.
I see.
By the way, that also tends to, as we get older, we tend to become more cautious.
Mm,
Most human beings are more risk-taking between the ages of 15 and 25
mhm,
than they are when they're 85. That's
mm,
generally the case, and we don't have time, but there's a lot
mhm,
of biological reasons for that.
mhm, mhm.
But surrender to Krishna there are 6 items of surrender given in Shastra: to accept
Right.
what's favorable, to
Mhm,
reject what's unfavorable, to
mhm,
see that only Krishna is maintaining me, to see that only Krishna is protecting me,
mm,
to not have any separate interests, to have a sense that all my desires have to be fulfilled by Krishna, to dedicate everything to him, and always to be meek and humble. So
mm.
those are the 6 items of surrender, none of which have the slightest thing to do with risk-taking or
Okay.
caution.
Okay.
And what I think happens is we tend to think that being a devotee means to develop some sort of generic type of personality.
Mm,
Now, such a conception runs completely against the idea of varna.
mm,
There are only 4 kinds of, but 4 temperaments, or
mhm,
nature, and karma.
mhm,
And so being a devotee means to have a match
mhm.
between your nature or your temperament and what kind of work that you do.
Okay.
Uh, Action in Krishna consciousness doesn't mean to try to become a different kind of person in this life.
Mm,
And all that results in is taking another birth. So
mm,
if I'm very cautious in this life and I think all devotees should be risk takers, then I'm just going to have to take another birth so I can be more of a risk taker. And if
mm.
I'm a very risk-taking person and I think I wish I was more cautious, then I have to take another birth to become more cautious. It doesn't really go anywhere.
Okay. Okay.
So instead of looking at those kind of things,
Mhm,
first of all, we can't change those in this life. Krishna says you can't repress your nature.
mhm,
So whatever what Prabhupada would call psychophysical nature is in this life, it is. It has its good sides, it has its bad sides.
mhm,
I try to, as Prabhupada would say, make the best use of a bad bargain.
mm,
Understand what my nature is, what kind of wiring do I have,
Mhm.
and then use that in Krishna's service.
Mm.
That is surrender.
Okay. Okay. Brilliant. So, Mataji, if somebody who's watched this podcast is truly inspired and they're thinking, I want to work for Krishna, so where do they begin?
Well, you've got three main areas of work in life: bhakti, varna, and ashram.
Mhm.
So if you want to work for Krishna in terms of bhakti, we have 64 limbs of bhakti. We
Mhm.
have the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada's mission within that mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I would suggest to look at the seven purposes of ISKCON. And
Okay.
I was part of a committee that developed a booklet, which
Mhm.
I can share with you on WhatsApp if you remind me,
Sure.
of how those purposes can be exemplified in the world.
Okay.
Look at those seven purposes of ISKCON and see where can I fit there? How
Mhm.
can I contribute to Mahaprabhu's mission with my particular talents, my particular knowledge, my particular nature, my particular activities?
Mhm.
And then, of course, to take up the basic angas of bhakti, especially Srila Prabhupada wanted us to chant japa. That
Mhm.
was the only thing he made us vow to do.
Mhm.
And if possible, to rise early and worship at home or visit a
Mhm.
temple to contribute in some way
Mhm.
uh, to the mission, and preferably in cooperation with some temple of Prabhupada's
Mhm.
movement.
Mhm.
Then in terms of ashram,
Mhm.
so how can I work for Krishna in terms of ashram? So if I'm a young person, how can I study for Krishna? How can I learn things that will help me see Krishna everywhere and help me
Mhm.
become prepared to dedicate myself to his mission? If I'm, in the youthful portion of life, like between, say, age 18 and 50 or 1860, how can I raise a family for the Lord? How
Mhm.
can I have a job that's according to my nature, that I
Mhm.
can do for the glories of the Lord to create a society of peace and prosperity and have as Prabhupada said that phrase over and over again, and how to have a foundation for the Sankirtan movement.
Mhm.
If I'm in middle age, how can I, gradually let go of my financial and familial
Mhm.
responsibilities, maybe spend some time traveling to holy places,
Mhm.
maybe spend, more time in chanting, spend more time in Shastric study, maybe teaching others, volunteering and in ISKCON projects, volunteering my expertise,
Mhm.
guiding people in their life in the world.
Mhm.
And if you're in old age, like 75 or 85 and above,
Mhm.
how can I really now just focus on packing my own suitcase?
Mhm.
Everyone has to fly their own plane. It was funny. I met a devotee a few months ago who became a pilot and actually owns his own little private
Uh-huh.
plane. And
Mhm.
he said, well, Prabhupada said everyone should fly their own plane. And I said, well, he didn't mean it quite like that. Uh, but, at the end of life, we prepare that we're
Mhm.
are we may, if we have the health and the strength and energy to go on preaching and contributing outwardly to the mission, we can do that. And if not, then we prepare in our own internal
Mhm.
meditation. In terms of Varna, we
Mhm.
see what is my nature, what is my temperament, which of the
Mhm.
Varnas is my temperament. And we have our whole book, Career Dharma, and
Right.
courses on
Mhm.
to understand what is my temperament. And then I do work in the world for Krishna, for Krishna's sake,
Mhm.
according to that temperament. So those are the three ways in which I work, three main areas of work for Krishna.
Brilliant, brilliant, Mataji. Mataji, you just mentioned about Career Dharma, the book, and also I think you have launched the certification courses. So, how do people get your book and also sign up for your certification course?
Well, I'll send you a URL, which you can put
Okay,
on the
sure. I'll
where
do that.
people can sign up on our mailing list.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we're about to launch a certification course for coaches.
Mm-hmm.
People be coaches to help others
Mm-hmm.
find out what their place is. And we're also just about to launch a fully online course in Career Dharma
Mm-hmm.
for people who want to use that as an adjunct to the book or instead of the book or with the book. So
Mm-hmm.
those two things should be coming very soon. And we're hoping that within a year or so, we'll have a simplified version of the book that it's acting more like a workbook. So that's in progress.
Okay,
So I'll give you the URL for our mailing list. And if you sign
sure.
up there, you get notification of all that.
Sure, sure, Mataji. So, Mataji, of course, I had so many more questions, but we are running out of time. Is there anything that I have not asked, but you would like to add?
No, I think this is just lovely for the time that we have. Yes, we could certainly talk about this for months, but I think for the time we have, it's very complete. And I thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Mataji, I don't know what to say. It's still a dream come true for me. It's going to take at least a couple of days for me to digest that we actually had this conversation. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for setting such an exemplary example, demonstrating what it is to practice the art of working for Krishna and teaching us the art of working for Krishna. So I'm extremely grateful for your time, for your wisdom, and all the practical guidance for generations that are going to come with all your digital asset that you have created and continuing to create. You are going to make tremendous impact on so many upcoming devotees' lives, Mataji. I'm just one of them. So my Dandavat pranams to you. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you very much. Well, any mistakes here are my own, and I hope you can ignore them. And anything good in this presentation comes from Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas and the Lord himself, and not from me. Thank you. Hare
Absolutely. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.